Welcome to today's webinar. This is Jack Zenger, and I'm here with my colleague Joe Folkman. We're here to talk with you about strategic vision. Over the years, I've been in hundreds of conversations about leaders and their respective strengths and weaknesses. And one of the most common comments that I've heard, particularly when people were bringing up what they perceived as a weakness, was, well, this person is not all that strategic. And when pushed, and I've tried to do this on several occasions, people are quite vague about what they mean by that. But let me tell you what I think they are referring to. I think they're talking about the fact that this person is not perceived as kind of looking at the longer term, not perceived as seeing things in the broader scope of things beyond their organization, looking at the entire industry and what's going on, looking at the broader economy. I think a second issue is that they're often not seen as willing to get off the beaten path, that they're kind of stuck in doing things as they've been done. And the other one is that they don't see them as being skillful at communicating the vision of the organization to their subordinates and to their colleagues. And finally, I believe that they're talking about just this notion that they're not able to connect the big picture to the near-term tactics and shorter-term goals that the organization is embarked on. Is that your sense, Joe? I mean, is that...
It really is, and it's so critical. And we're going to talk more about this. And in fact, I was with a group a few years ago, and I asked the question, how many people in an organization need to have a strategic vision? And, the wisecracker, he spoke up and he said, well, at least one. And that's true. I mean, if you don't have any, it's nice to have one. But that got me thinking about, is that all you need? I mean, is one enough? And when you think about an organization and you think about different functions and how the person in that function needs to be thinking, where are we going and where's the field going and what do I need to do to be on the cutting edge? When you think about different products and how one product doesn't sell like the others, and people really need to think about what's the vision? How can I create more value for this product? And so my sense is, and Jack, I'd love to get you to weigh in on this, is you can't have too many.
Absolutely. The more people that are clear about strategy in the organization and who think in those terms, the better off you are.
We did a study, and this particular study was 107 executives who unfortunately were fired. Their average tenure was 17 years. When we looked at the reasons why people were let go, one of the top reasons was they were not viewed as being strategic. In fact, when we looked at those who were fired, their average effectiveness on strategy and direction was about the 32nd percentile compared to the 54th percentile for the average. And 46% of these were rated as this was a very fundamental reason why they were let go. As you read those comments on these folks, what you see in the comments is that a lot of these people were kind of operation-oriented. They were very good technically, or they really understood a particular function, but they got narrow and they got deep, and they never sort of saw the big picture. Jack, I'll bet you've encountered that on occasion.
We've encountered that a great deal, yes. We've continued to think about this question about what does an individual need in order to truly execute well for their organization. And certainly one piece of it is that they need to have a clear vision of where we're going in the future. But people who have visions and people who have great dreams need something in addition. They need to have the ability to have acumen about two broad areas. And we're going to define acumen to be information, knowledge in the financial arena, so that they understand how the organization makes money and monetizes what it's doing, And secondly, that they understand the underlying technology of the business that they're in. Now, I don't mean they need to be research scientists, but I spent a decade working for a pharmaceutical company. In hindsight, I wish I'd spent more time truly understanding the technology. I would have been more strategic in my contributions to that organization. I also worked for 10 years for a publishing organization that had a wide range of publishing activities, including television, cable TV. But to really contribute to an organization, you need to understand the fundamental technology of the businesses that they're in.
You know, Jack, organizations are becoming more and more complex. And if you're flying above all that complexity, a lot of times you can make really bad decisions.
Some time ago, we conducted a study where we looked at the relationship between two competencies. Those who were in the top quartile on strategic vision and those who were in the top quartile on that capability of business acumen. We looked at, first of all, people who were in the top quartile on strategic vision, but not in the top quartile on acumen. And what we found was that one of those individuals, the likelihood of them being in the top 10% of all leaders in their firm was roughly 13% of the time. If we flipped that over and said, let's look at people who were not in the top quartile when it came to being strategic in their thinking, but they were in business acumen, what's the chances of that person being in the top 10% of leaders? And here we found that it was, 3% of the time.
It's an interesting comparison because when you look at the two, Jack, and you say, well, if I only do one of those, being strategic was better. I mean, it got you more, but it only got you 13%. And being really good in acumen only gets you 3%.
And so what we found was that obviously if you found somebody who was in the top quartile on both of them, it was not just adding those two together, but it jumped to 83% of the time a person who's in the top quartile on these two capabilities is going to be in your top 10% of leaders in the organization. It's a fascinating thing that strategy minus acumen sort of equals a dreamer, and acumen minus strategic vision is a professor or a technician who's living in a very narrow world.
That's very true, and you find a lot of that it's like a problem in search of a solution and a solution in search of a problem.
What we think strategic vision does for the firm and for the individual is that, one, it enables them to kind of transform insights into action. Secondly, it helps them lead their organization to continual growth. And frankly, that's really what strategic vision is trying to do for the firm. It's how do you help the firm continue to grow? It isn't the old view of strategy, which was how do you carve out a unique position and sort of get on top of that hill and defend it against all comers. It's really how do you continue to create value and over again find new products, new ideas, new ways to the market that will enable you to grow. And I think thirdly, the strategic vision aids the organization in kind of creating the theory of its own firm, its purpose, what makes it unique, the DNA, the glue that holds it together. For that thought, I'm very much in debt to my son, Todd Zenger, who's a professor of strategy at a local university and who's about to publish a book that Harvard is publishing called Beyond Competitive Advantage. And those are fundamentally the conclusions that he's come to about where strategy is going in most organizations.
One of the things we like to do in this webinar is give you some global data and look at strategic vision in terms of trends and global trends. One of our assumptions in most organizations is that senior leaders are more strategic. We hope. And sure enough, as we looked at the data, we found in a study of 47,000 global leaders that our top management rated at the 55th percentile, and then senior management 49th, and middle management 48th. So we did see that trend towards senior leaders being viewed as being more strategic. The next thing we looked at was gender. And this is a little bit of a sensitive topic. Jack and I just updated our gender research that we did, 6 or 7 years ago. And what we found in that original study was that females tended to be rated higher on leadership effectiveness than males. In fact, as we looked at the competencies, many of the competencies they were rated better at. And when we updated the study just recently, we found that females were rated more positively on 13 of the 16 competencies. Congratulations. But there were 2 competencies where males were rated more positively. I kind of refer to them as the big 2, and you know why. But one of those competencies was strategic vision. And as you looked at the scores for males, they were at the 51st percentile, and females were at the 49th. And what's interesting is you kind of try to understand where that came from, how that data emerged. When we looked at strategic vision by age, what we found is that at a young age, females and males, there's a big gap at a younger age, and males are seen as more strategic when they're younger. But you see that by the age of 40, that disappears. And in fact, females go above the line and actually are viewed a little higher in terms of strategic vision as they're older. And so that gap is completely created at a younger age where males tend to be more strategic than females. And I'm not sure why that exists. I need to think about it a little more.
Well, I think it was useful to note, too, Joe, that the gap isn't a huge gap,
No.
but it is statistically significant because of the huge number involved.
Yep. We also looked at different functions and which function was most strategic. Interestingly enough, the people in the sales organizations were viewed at the highest level. General management, the second, customer service. Again, the lowest in terms of strategy, safety, HR training, engineering. What you tend to see is sometimes the more functionally focused areas aren't viewed as being as strategic. The engineering and manufacturing, administrative, those tend to be less strategic.
It just dawned on me, too, that the salespeople are out talking with customers, and we'll talk later on in our webinar here about how customer focus and customer interaction helps people be more strategic.
Isn't that true? And that's kind of that's their leverage there.
Mm-hmm.
We looked at countries where vision was rated high. Interestingly enough, China was rated number 1, United States number 2, South Korea, Pakistan, Hong Kong, Switzerland. These are the highest rated countries in terms of strategy. We then looked at our 16 competencies, and what I was interested in was where strategy would fall in terms of how highly it was rated. It actually came in number 12 in terms of its rating. That's not surprising. This is difficult to achieve. Most people struggle with this a bit. And oftentimes people have a difficult time being viewed as strategic, and that sort of, I think, emphasizes the difficulty here. Then we looked at, well, how important is strategy? And it actually comes in at number 9. So it's not viewed as the most important thing, and which is kind of confusing to me in some respects, because you would think that if you really look back and said, what's probably the most important thing in an organization? Is it execution or is it strategy? And I would put strategy ahead of execution. But, if you just execute on a bad strategy, you're not going to be successful. As people started to give feedback and say, what's important for this manager or for that manager, because not all of our managers are viewed as setting this direction for the organization, I think that's why that's rated lower, Jack. You have any theories on that?
No, I think that's exactly right. I think that is the best answer. Let's talk a little bit about this person that I mentioned very early on, who is referred to by his or her colleagues as not being very strategic, seen as being quite tactical. What would you recommend to this person? So this is moving from kind of having sort of poor effectiveness in this arena. And so the kind of recommendations I think you'd make is take some time to really understand your organization, what they say their strategy is, what their key goals are, how they make money, what makes this organization distinctive. And then go forward and analyze the competition and the rest of the industry. What are the strengths and weaknesses of your best competitors? Be able to kind of articulate those threats and opportunities that may be looming from them as you interact in the marketplace. Devour information about your own company and its financials and the global trends and industry trends and general financial news. So the kinds of things that you'd recommend would be just becoming an avid student, get some good books on strategy, attend webinars, seminars, maybe even turn to some people in the organization who are looked upon as being really good in the strategic arena, and see if you can get help from them. That's what helps a person who is not doing well at all to get, at least up to average.
A few years ago, I got a call from a fellow, and he said, I need you to coach somebody. And I said, well, what's the problem? And they kind of paused for a minute, and then they said, they're not strategic. I thought, okay. So I called the individual up, and I said, I'm your coach, and do you know what the issue is? And they kind of paused, and they go, I'm not strategic. And I said, well, do you know what to do? And this person said, I don't have a clue. I just don't have a clue. And I think, Jack, that the list that you just gave us is very helpful. Actually, I did get another coaching opportunity with someone who same issue, they weren't strategic. And I called him up and I said, do you have a plan of what you can do? And he says, yeah. And I said, so what's your plan? He said, I'm going to go out and buy a whole bunch of books on strategy and put them on the bookshelf. And I said, you going to read them? He says, nah. But I think the advertising will do it. I said, do you have another? Is that all the plan? He says, no, I've got another thing I'm going to do. What are you going to do? He says, I'm going to go to meetings and accuse other department heads of not being strategic. Well, that was his plan. I don't think it worked out real well. But again, this idea that if you're not good, if strategy is a weakness, then you need to take some time to understand the strategy. You need to read and study. You really need to dig in and maybe get some coaching. And that gets you from bad to good. But when people start thinking about, what would I do to be rated at the 90th percentile on strategy, to be really, truly great at strategy, again, what's funny is that people still continue kind of a linear approach. I mean, go to more seminars and webinars, or more reading and more books, or more coaching. And what we found is that there's a point where the things that got you to good will not get you to great. And that's where we've discovered you need these companion behaviors. So what we did is we looked at thousands of leaders, and we did an analysis where we analyzed those who were viewed as having strategic vision. And what we found is that there were these 8 companion competencies, these 8 behaviors that really enabled this transition from good to great. And it's these companion behaviors. And Jack, in his initial comments, talked about one of these, business acumen. And you saw that powerful combination. When you combine strategic vision with business acumen, you got this powerful combination. And really, you get that with all of these. So what we'd like to do is talk about these now, and we'd challenge you to think about, in terms of this webinar, what could I do to improve my strategic vision?
These 8 companion behaviors were derived kind of very empirically. And what we've done is just to sort of stand back and look at them and say, could we put some of them together and maybe identify in general 5 of these cross-training, nonlinear approaches to getting better at strategic vision. The first one is developing a more accurate understanding of customers and their problems. Over the years, when I've been asked to coach people on the topic of strategic thinking, I've been pleasantly surprised that when I've recommended to them that they go out and visit customers, they've often paused for a moment, but then said, yeah, I can see that. And so most people, if they stop and think about it, recognize if I'm going to be more strategic, I've really got to be in the mind of the customer. Secondly, there's a willingness to innovate, try new things, to see what works, to try experiments. The second cluster is innovation. The third cluster is one about, thinking in a very deep and kind of critical and analytical way about what are the strengths of the organization, what do I see as the future opportunities, and how can we put our strengths to work on those opportunities. The fourth cluster has to do with acquiring this strong business and technical acumen that we've already alluded to. And then the final one has to do with some behavioral changes that the leader might want to kind of consider. Behaviors like being a better communicator, setting stretch goals for the group that he or she works with, championing change, and inspiring and motivating those around you to higher performance. So these are the 5 areas that we're going to talk about.
So let's start with customer focus. And again, just understanding your customers and your consumers. Why are they your customers? What are their concerns? What would cause them to not be your customer? What might happen in the future? What's fascinating this year is we have 2 clients in the same business sector. And client A is experiencing explosive growth. In fact, at a conference I just attended with them, they were trying to figure out how do we really bring on these new employees. There's so many, and we can't sort of get them acclimated and sort of teach them and really spread the culture. They opened several new plants and acquired several businesses last year. Client B had significant layoffs. They closed a number of plants and sold businesses. Now, the only difference, between these two clients is the customers, and the customers changed. Now, client B is still making a great product. There's nothing wrong with it. It's really a wonderful product, and in fact, they've innovated in terms of that product, but customers changed what they liked. And client A saw that coming. They noticed it. They had a good sense for it. Client B didn't. They didn't see it coming, and they weren't able to catch up, and so they lost that opportunity.
When you're in a well-established business, the topic of innovation sometimes seems very daunting. And so we were struck recently by a company that we became familiar with that was in, of all things, the pencil business. Now stop and think for a moment about what do you do with a wood pencil, lead pencil, that would be innovative. So 3 MIT students apparently were given this problem, and they came up with a very clever idea. They decided to replace the traditional eraser with a little plastic cap that would contain some seeds. Could be some herbs, could be some flowers, could be some vegetables. And so when you used the pencil and you were through, you were down to the nub of the pencil, you simply stuck it in the ground and watered it. And from this you would grow. And I thought, there is a classic case of taking a really old traditional product and being innovative in what you do with it.
And they're being very successful.
Selling 500,000 pencils a month, apparently.
Because you can plant your pencil.
You can plant the pencil.
This is great. A lot of people, when they think of strategy, they think it's really all about innovation, and that's part of it. But another part of it is really taking the time to analyze, to really look at trends, to forecast, to predict. These are all critical factors, and so there's that innovative end, but there's also that problem-solving end, and that seeing that trend and noticing what's going on in the environment. We did a study where we looked at people's ability to solve problems and analyze issues, and then we looked at strategic vision. And you can see the dynamics there. If you're in the bottom 10% on solving problems, you're in the 11th percentile on strategic vision. If you're in the top 10%, you're in the 89th percentile. What we found is those with great strategic vision take the time to do careful analysis and fact-finding and experimentation and forecasting. Now, another thing that is critical for leaders in terms of strategic vision is communicating powerfully. There's a lovely story about Florence Chadwick. Now, she was an American swimmer known for long-distance open water swimming, the first woman to swim the English Channel in both directions and setting a time record each time she did it. She also swam to Catalina Island, but the first time she tried to get to Catalina Island, she wasn't successful. There's a wonderful story about her doing that first swim, and it was a very foggy day, and again, she got in the water, and she was surrounded by boats to protect her from sharks, and her parents were actually there with her, and they went right along with her, and she swam in the fog for hours and hours. And at some point, as she's in this fog, she just goes up to the boat, and she says, "I think I'm going to quit." And her parents encourage her, "You can do it. You can just keep going." And so she swam a little further, and again, the fog was so thick she couldn't see anything, and she quit. And she got into the boat. The boat went just a very short distance, and all of a sudden, Catalina appears. Yeah, it's right there. She was a mile away from Catalina. Now, the reason I love this story is if you're out there, if you're an executive, if you're a manager, your people are in the fog. They cannot see that goal. They cannot see that objective. They are lost. And some of them don't even know where they're swimming to, or some of them don't even know why they're swimming. As a leader, your ability to communicate and keep people informed and let them know where they are in relation to that goal and that objective is absolutely critical.
So the fundamental message is that strategic vision is of little value if you keep it to yourself. It has great value when you share it with those who are about you. So leaders who are skilled in communicating are able then to have other people believe that a future vision is possible, and they enable them to kind of move into action, and they help them to connect their work to the company's strategy. Then they energize them and help them to believe that they can truly achieve exceptional results. And this then combines to create this climate of continual improvement for the organization.
Another characteristic of visionary leaders is that they establish stretch goals. Now, what's interesting is an incremental goal requires no change in the vision, just more effort, more budget. But when you set a stretch goal, it requires you to rethink the vision because you can't just get there by working harder or spending more money or do more marketing or more advertising. You need to have a different strategy, a unique strategy. And again, when we looked at leaders who were very effective at setting stretch goals, they were substantially more visionary. As I thought about businesses where this has happened, Jack, I just thought about us. We wanted to introduce a new product, and so we did. We introduced a new product, but we sold it through our traditional marketing and sales efforts, didn't we? We just used our standard process, and we got some sales. We did okay, but we never hit the targets we wanted to. And just a short time ago, we started to look at it, and we said, we need a different strategy. We need to realize that the people that are buying this kind of product are slightly different people, and the process needs to be different. So, gosh, we ate our own medicine here.
That's right. So let us tell you about a little study that we also did recently, where not just taking people who were in the top quartile on business acumen and on strategic vision, but Joe actually looked at people who were in the top 5%. That is, that they were at the 95th percentile when it came to each of these capabilities. So strategic vision at the 95th percentile, and also business acumen at that same high level. What characterized this very elite group of people? And we've listed some of those qualities on the slide here that's on the screen. They had a great ability to bring new information to the group from outside the organization back into the organization. They really excelled at communicating a clear sense of direction and purpose. They were trusted to use good judgment in making decisions. They were really effective at being able to kind of see the changes that needed to be made immediately in the organization. Their speed kind of greatly accelerated. They were very good communicators, both in writing, the presentations that they made, in their one-on-one conversations with people in the organization. They were remarkable at their communication skills. And all this then combined to keep the focus on the high priority goals and objectives for the organizations. And if you kind of read through that list, you see them kind of alternating back and forth between things that would particularly kind of relate to the strategic vision quality that they had, and also to the business acumen quality that they had. But that's this prime example of this powerful combination of those two things.
Another characteristic of those who were really good at strategic vision was they were excellent at championing change. Look, a new strategy requires change. I mean, if you have a new strategy, you need to implement it. And organizations are great at resisting change, at fighting against it. They want the status quo. They don't want to change. And so we found that leaders who are very good at creating and managing and championing change were also more strategic. And again, we looked at the study here as willing to become a champion for new projects and programs, bottom 10%. Their ability to provide strategic vision, 24th percentile, top 10%, 81st percentile. Huge difference there. The last one is around inspiring and motivating others. And without inspiration, strategies are just nice ideas or theories. Inspiration is the magic that is required to get strategies implemented. Several years ago, I went to a meeting. I was as an assistant scoutmaster with my son. My son was about 14 years old. And the scoutmaster got up and he says, "This year, we're going to hike to the tallest peak in Utah. It's Kings Peak. It's 13,500 feet. Now, Kings Peak is located in a wilderness area, and because it's in a wilderness area, there are no roads anywhere close to it. You actually have to hike 2 days just to get to the peak, and then you have to hike up the peak. And so as he talked about this, I thought about my son and I just had this great desire. I wanted my son to have this moment that he would remember for the rest of his life. And I had a vision. I visualized my son and I on top of the peak with his friends, and we're just doing high fives, and I had this vision, my son and I on top of the mountain. And I thought, that would be so great. And then I thought about it for a while, and I thought, gee, that would make a memory. What a wonderful thing to make that kind of memory with my son. But then I thought about how hard the hike was, and I thought, I wonder if I died. This is not the memory I want. But having that vision, having that goal, having that in my mind really set me up to kind of exercise and work out. And so we started the hike, and as we went in and started up that mountain, I remember looking back down the mountain, and what a sense of accomplishment I've got at how far I've gone. And I was just invigorated by looking back. And then I made the mistake of looking up the mountain. And I go, oh, no. I looked up, I looked back, and I thought, oh, my gosh, I don't think I can make it. But I had that vision. I could see myself on top of that mountain with my son. And so I kept hiking, and I got there. There is so much to this. Part of a vision is creating that inspiration, that motivation for people, that visual of them doing something that's amazing, that's great. And again, the best leaders, Jack, they're really good at this. They are strategic, but they're also inspirational.
Well, that kind of brings us down to just maybe kind of wrapping up. What can we conclude from this discussion that we've had about strategic vision and how leaders can acquire it? I think it's pretty clear from what we've said that there's no one simple silver bullet. It indeed is a combination of things, many things that come together. The good news is it can be learned. It involves behaving in some new ways as a leader. It is, secondly, a willingness to break out of the old mold and try new things and think in new ways and to be innovative. There is a very strong dependence on your ability to see things through the eyes of your customers. After all, as Peter Drucker said so many years ago, having a customer creates a business. And without a customer, you have no business. And fourth, that strategic vision requires a willingness to collect data, to analyze that data, to see the patterns that emerge from that data, and then to kind of make some very good and sometimes tough decisions. Being a good strategist demands saying no to some things and saying yes to a few things. And it also demands having a strong, clear understanding of the technical side of your business.
We'd like to extend an invitation for you to attend our Leadership Summit, July 11th through 14th in Salt Lake City. This is an opportunity for you and Jack and I to get together, to ask some questions of each other, to hear some thought leaders in the field. We're going to showcase a new product called the Leadership Levers, which is really a kind of a groundbreaking product for us. And if you come, I will personally cook you the best steak you've ever eaten. It's a promise. Be there July 11th through 14th.
We hope this discussion of strategic vision has been helpful. We welcome your comments, look forward to you accessing our webpage. If you have further questions, don't hesitate to let us know.
Thanks so much.